He embraced me gently and led me toward the shower. With a swift motion, he turned on the water, the kind I hadn't had access to in my own home. We lingered for a moment, but curiosity overtook me. I reached for the package, held it firmly, and parted my lips. As it disappeared inside, I slowed my pace, pausing momentarily at the peculiar sensation it created. It was a sound and experience unfamiliar to me for years. His piercing gaze from above seemed to command, "Go on." He lifted his head and squeezed his eyes shut as though deeply moved by something indescribable. Without hesitation, he resumed, one motion after another, murmuring, "It's on its way. Trust me, this thrill is universal, no matter your experience or youth." "Oh," I stammered, startled by a sudden realization. "Were you here the whole time?" "Let me begin from the start. It all seemed like a harmless favor at first. At least, that's how I rationalized it. Living in a serene cul-de-sac, it's common for neighbors to exchange small favors, like borrowing sugar or watching over each other's pets. So when the Thompsons asked me to keep an eye on their home while they went on a family trip, I didn't hesitate to agree. The Thompsons were lovely neighbors, kind, approachable, and always warm. Their sons, Ethan and Liam, had blossomed into young men and radiating charm and vitality. Ethan had that effortless, carefree demeanor. His sandy brown hair always looked artfully tousled, and his grin was infectious. Liam, though quieter, exuded a magnetic intensity, his dark eyes speaking volumes. On a sunny Friday morning, the family piled into their SUV, luggage stacked high, ready for their trip. I waved them off from my porch, expecting a quiet week of routine duties like collecting mail and watering plants. But then, things took an unexpected turn. 2 days later, while I was savoring a peaceful Saturday morning, my husband Peter casually mentioned, "The water's out next door." Curiosity propelled me to investigate. As I entered their vacant home, a strange stillness enveloped me. The scent of freshly laundered clothes and a faint woodsy aroma lingered. I walked through, inspecting faucets and ensuring everything was in order. Then I noticed it. A handwritten note on the kitchen counter. "If there's any trouble, call Ethan," it read, followed by his neatly penned phone number. I stared at it longer than I should have, feeling a strange flutter of anticipation. It seemed innocent enough to reach out about the water issue. But as I stood there, the faint sound of running water caught my attention. Initially dismissing it as my imagination, the sound grew louder. Following the noise, I found myself at the bathroom door, slightly ajar. Steam escaped in wispy tendrils, meeting the cooler air outside. Pushing the door open slightly, I froze. There stood Ethan, water cascading over his sunlit skin. His silhouette behind the frosted glass revealed a figure sculpted by a life of motion and activity. I should have left. I should have turned back, closed the door, and exited silently. But I didn't. My feet stayed rooted, my pulse quickened, and unspoken questions flooded my mind. Sensing my presence, Ethan turned toward me. His movements were deliberate, unhurried. Through the misted glass, his eyes found mine. Instead of retreating, he held my gaze, his expression unreadable but unwavering. As he stepped out, a towel hung low on his hips, water droplets glistening on his chest. The air between us felt charged, and the proximity was almost unbearable. His hazel eyes, flecked with gold, captured mine, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. "I assumed you were away on vacation." I barely managed to speak, my voice soft, almost inaudible. His grin widened, yet he remained silent, choosing instead to reach past me, his arm brushing against mine as he grabbed another towel from the rack. The brief touch sent a surge through me, a spark I couldn't deny, leaving me dizzy. I stayed behind. He finally said, his voice casual, as if we were discussing the weather, not standing inches apart in his family's deserted house. I wanted to ask why, to demand an explanation, to remind him this wasn't right, that I shouldn't be here. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there, the weight of the moment overwhelming my thoughts, drowning out reason. Then he did something that completely took me off guard. He reached out, his fingers lightly brushing my wrist. The touch was so gentle it could have been a mistake, if not for the way his gaze remained locked on mine. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low, almost playful. Such a simple question, yet it shattered everything inside me. The polite mask, the boundaries I had carefully built, the years of being the reliable neighbor, the devoted wife. All of it crumbled in an instant. "I should go," I whispered, but my body betrayed me. staying exactly where I was. Yet Ethan didn't pull away. His hand lingered, his thumb drawing slow, deliberate circles on my skin. The tension between us was unbearable, yet I didn't want it to end. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was me, maybe him, maybe the inevitability of it all, the slow unraveling of everything we were supposed to be. But before I knew it, the space between us vanished, and his lips were on mine, soft and insistent, igniting something I hadn't felt in years. The kiss was brief, just a stolen moment, but it was enough to make my world spin. When we pulled away, his eyes searched mine, questioning, daring me to admit what we both already knew. The heat of the moment hung in the air, as tangible as the steam clinging to the bathroom walls. I hadn't intended to stay, hadn't planned for any of this, but each step toward the door felt impossible, like I was walking through thick mud. Each moment seemed to stretch endlessly. Before I could turn, I felt Ethan behind me, his presence magnetic, pulling me back. My breath caught as I looked at him, still wrapped in nothing but a towel, clinging to his body as if he didn't want to let go either. His skin was glistening, damp, catching the soft light from the frosted window. He moved closer, the air between us humming with a palpable weight. My back brushed against the cool wall, sending a shiver through me. His fingers found my wrist again, but this time there was no hesitation. His grip was firm yet gentle, grounding me as if I might float away. His touch was electric, trailing fire along my arm. I closed my eyes for a moment, but it only made everything more intense. The scent of soap and warm skin, the damp heat of his body, the rhythm of our breaths as the distance between us grew smaller. When his hand reached my shoulder, he paused, his thumb brushing along the edge of my collarbone. It was the smallest motion, but it felt like the world had shifted beneath me. I opened my eyes, met his gaze, and the intensity in his eyes stole the calm I had left. He leaned down, his forehead resting against mine, a silent closeness that quickened my pulse. His breath brushed my cheek, a subtle mix of mint and something uniquely him. When his lips met mine again, they weren't hurried or desperate. Every movement was deliberate, slow, as if he were savoring this forbidden indulgence. The towel shifted slightly, and his hands found my waist, drawing me closer until there was no space between us. His touch was everywhere, his fingers tracing the curve of my hips, his palms pressing into my back, the warmth of his skin meeting mine like a brand. He held me close and led me to the shower. The water I didn't have at home. We continued here, and I was curious about the sensation, so I took it in my hand and slowly opened my mouth. I paused, hearing the sound it made, feeling a sensation I hadn't known in years. His gaze above urged me to continue, his eyes squeezed shut as if deeply moved. With each movement, he said, "It's coming, trust me," and I felt that same rush, regardless of experience or age. I saw that what excited him was something big, and I couldn't wait to experience it. There was a vibration, and the liquid from the packet began to spill from the corner of my mouth. It was delicious, but I still wasn't full. I stood and slid the packet into my muffin, overwhelmed with joy as I moved. He made me feel truly cherished. I couldn't tell where I ended, and he began. Our bodies fit together as if we were always meant to be this way, familiar yet impossible. My hands moved on their own, tracing the hard lines of his shoulders, the smooth surface of his chest, my fingers catching droplets of water that clung to his skin. There was an aching need in his touch, an unspoken desire that mirrored mine. When his hands gripped my hips and pulled me closer, I gasped, the sound swallowed by his lips. He kissed me again, deeper this time, hungrier. Time seemed to stretch, the seconds becoming eternal as we lost ourselves in each other. Every touch, every breath, every stolen moment felt sacred, something forbidden but irresistible. It was a moment I knew I would never forget, an intimate secret that would linger in the corners of my mind, whispering about crossing boundaries and the allure of the forbidden.